Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of the Watch Rolling Podcast. The Watch Rolling Podcast is a veteran owned podcast that focuses on watch enthusiasm and horology with a military veteran twist and is also provides valuable veteran resources to the watch enthusiast community. My name is Jason. I'm your host. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. This is another special episode. This is episode 62. This is an interview with Miguel from SoCal Watch Reviews. SoCal Watch Reviews is a YouTube channel and a podcast. Miguel's been a longtime friend of the pod. Miguel's probably 95% of the reason why I started this podcast. Miguel's channel is awesome. He's not a veteran, but I feel like in this interview series that us veterans and anyone that's first responder, et cetera, can learn from people that do this for more. I would say more than a hobby. Miguel recently hit 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a huge milestone. And Miguel's Watch Enthusiast podcast and television or YouTube channel covers a wide range of stuff from it's awesome videography, photography, tells great stories, does really good watch reviews, and I think that's a lost art. He's pretty brutally honest in his watch reviews, and he recently did a pretty funny video, Spaghetti Scametti with Ben from Ben's Watch Club. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miguel from SoCal Watch Reviews. Hey,
Hey,
Miguel, how you
Jason.
doing?
Doing pretty good, man. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. I just gave everybody the rundown in your channel, and I'd like to
Wow.
start by congratulating you for 20,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone.
Yeah, hey, thanks, man. So 4 years in the making. It's been a lot of work, but it's definitely been worth it. I love every single minute of it. And I think the biggest thing about it, or getting into this kind of hobby and social media, is the friends that I built around the community, or friends in the community and
Yeah.
friends in the space, right? Instagram and YouTube and whatnot. But yeah, thanks for the intro. I mean, that was very, very kind of you. I'm like, wait, who's he talking about? Me?
Yeah.
That's insane. Cool,
Yeah.
next.
Well, and I think it's important for people to know, and I think like especially like leading off with that 4 years thing, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
today's day and age, I'm not trying to have a diatribe about society as a whole, but everybody thinks stuff's going to be instantaneous, and 4
Right.
years is a grind, man. 4 years is a grind, but 20K is huge,
Yeah, no,
huge.
thanks, man. Yeah, I got about 350, 360, something like that. 360 videos on YouTube or 350 videos on YouTube.
Yeah,
We've done about 124, 125 episodes on the podcast. That's been 3 years in the making. Instagram, it's cool. I like it. I think it's dying in a way because if you don't pay, you don't play. Basically, you just don't grow, right? So I've been at the same
yeah,
like 7,400, 7,500 follower for a while now. But the cool thing about Instagram, it's my messenger app. That's where I DM everybody, that's where I communicate
yeah,
with everybody, and I get to showcase my photography as well, and as
yeah,
a promotion tool as well, because when you are on YouTube, you need multiple platforms to generate momentum and some kind of marketing to all funnel everybody towards your YouTube channel. You know what I mean? But I
yeah,
think YouTube is huge for a lot of different reasons, especially companies. If you're listening and you have a small company or a bigger company, you need to get on social media because, and we'll get into this maybe a little
yeah.
bit more about sales. But remember, people love to buy but hate to be sold. So we'll get a little bit more into that. But yeah. Anyway,
Oh, no. No, that's an excellent segue, Miguel. So, and we've discussed it and I put it out in the intro a little bit, but the whole purpose of these interview series that's going on, which I probably should have plugged, but I didn't because, I just want them out there, is I feel like there's so many people in the watch enthusiast space, especially those that create content that is a part of what they do. That is not what they do, and it's most definitely not who they are. There's a little bit of each of one in what they produce. But, your background is in sales.
yeah,
And I think there's a level of polishing in your content creation because of your background in sales. Because I try to do sales once, and while I can talk stuff up, I just don't. I just it's not for me. But I know that there has to be a level of professionalism and polish when you're making those sales, and it's sometimes a longer process than people think. Right? Like you just don't walk
yeah,
into a room when someone's like, "I'm buying your stuff." You know what I mean?
right.
So with that being said, before we start going into the podcast and everything, would you mind just highlighting some of your professional experience that you're comfortable explaining to everybody
Yeah,
and your
for
background in
sure.
it?
No, absolutely. So from a personal perspective, I've been doing sales for close to like 17 years. I started I'm almost 40. Next month I'll be 40, and I've been doing sales since my early 20s. And the whole reason honestly why I even got into it is because from my family, my lineage, I guess, if you will, from my mom, even my dad, and some other family members, that sales is like in their body or in their blood, I should say. And that they're salespeople, right? Now, there's different levels to sales, right? So there's like the used car salesman approach where you're like trying to convince somebody and getting out the door, right? But
Yeah.
then there's the type of sales that I do, which is relationship building, and there's longevity in what you do because people want to buy from their friends, right? So once people get to know you and feel comfortable with you, it becomes so much easier because it's not about a sale. It's just about them trusting you. And it's like, oh, what do you have to present to me today, right? And it's more about, in the profession that I'm in my field, it's more about helping people, not so much I'm going to sell you this. So it's like, how can you help me make my job easier, right? So I know you mentioned a little something about recruiters, right?
Yeah.
Trying to sign somebody up or whatever. You also need to be aware that when it's that kind of scenario, or kind of what I do in watches, you're not selling so much the product as you are selling a lifestyle, and you're selling the emotion of how something's going to make you feel. And that's something that I like to do in my videos sometimes, because it takes a long time, like depending on the production. But when I do the more lifestyle shot videos where I'm like doing something or interacting with my watch, or you could see I'm like outside, or I wish I could do better things like swimming and other things, but it's a one man crew, so I don't have the
Yeah.
manpower to kind of do that. But I like that idea better. Speaking of watches, because it's using the watch in a scenario where you're typically going to use it. You're not just going to have a watch in an office with a well lit thing just sitting pretty there, right? Typically doesn't happen that way. It's like you have it on your wrist and you're doing an activity, and all you do is you glance down and then you see it sparkle and you're like, wow, right? So how do
Yeah.
you capture that emotion and that feeling into a video? That's very challenging, but that's what I like to do. And the same with sales, I would say to a recruiter, it's like, it's not so much about you're going to get 4 free meals and you're going to get a roof over your head and you're going to get really nice salary after you retire or whatever, which, I mean, those are the facts. But how do you put a little sprinkle of something? You
Yeah.
gotta make it look brighter. And it's like, look, man, it's a brotherhood. Once you get into this, say for instance, your family's not there for you all the time, but whatever, we will be there for you, right? And furthermore, you become part of this big grandioso kind of thing where, I don't know, you become a badass, right? You
Yeah.
get in the military, and it's just more about the idea and the feeling and the emotion that it evokes, as opposed to, hey, sign the dotted line. I need to meet my quota, and you become a very bad salesperson. It's not about sell me this pencil, right? And it's the whole thing with like the pencil idea or the pen thing,
Yeah.
right? A Wolf of Wall Street very well kind of presented that, where it's like, sell me this pencil. Well, this pencil is yellow and it has an eraser. It's like, no, you got to find out if that person has a need. And depending on that need, that's kind of where you weasel your way in, and kind of, and that's a bad word to say weasel because it sounds bad,
Yeah.
but it's true. It's like you find that little need, you find what that person is talking about. So if you want to sign somebody up in the military and they're like, yeah, I do want to do that because there's so much stuff going on at home with my family or whatever, then that's when you use a family approach. Well, we're a huge family, right? Or yeah, I saw my dad struggling. He worked all his life and his pension sucked. Well, have great news for you. When you become a part of the military, we have a great pension program. Let me explain it to you and see if that appeals to them, right? Or I'm a huge movie buff. Oh, you are? What kind of movies you like? Action. Ah, you're gonna love this. How about becoming part of the action? It's like
Yeah.
you need to be smart enough to read the room and then kind of use the tools in your bag to kind of sell that approach. So that's,
Nice.
anyway, I kind of deviated from
No,
everything,
no,
but
no.
that's what I do. I love doing sales, and like I said, it's not more about selling the product, but more about creating the relationship. And the way that's helped me in my approach is with the podcast. I've been able to land some pretty big guests, and it's
Yeah.
not because my channel is humongous, because I landed them when my channel was small. It was more about the follow up, the persistency, the building the relationship. And I didn't right away ask them, like, hey, can you come on the podcast? It was more about, I love what you do. I'm a huge fan. Or maybe even asking for a pointer. Hey, I saw you saw this. Do you mind if I pick your brain? How do you do that? Right. And something that I'm kind of notorious for doing, and I don't know if people like it or not, but I'll go. Instagram has a portion where you could actually send voice memos, and I'm huge on sending voice memos. I like written stuff, but I like expressing myself so people could
Yeah,
actually see or hear the emotion in my voice, whether I'm happy, excited, sad, whatever. I think that goes a long way. A text message, as you know, you put the emotion that you want to put on it when you're reading it, right? It could be a positive message, but if you're feeling crappy, you're going to read it in a negative way and be like, what is
yeah,
wrong with that person? Why would they
yeah,
send me this message? Right? But when
yeah,
you send a voice memo, there is no interpretation. The person literally sounds happy or sounds sad, and typically that's what I do.
yeah.
I'll send a message. So anyway, if you're starting out on YouTube or whatever, that's an approach that I take. And if you want to take a page out of my book, feel free.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I remember the first time you sent me a voice memo, I was like, "Oh, crap." And I was like, "Oh,"
What is that? What is? Should I click on
so I
it?
listened to it and I was like, "What am I supposed to do?" But you got a point though about like the tone and stuff like that, right? With
Yeah.
the text, how it's
Right. Right.
lacking
Right.
because part of the reason I start this is a dude, this is part of the reason why I started this podcast is because one time we were texting back and forth and you said, "Why don't you start a podcast of your own?" And because
Yeah.
of the venue I was in or something like that, I read it as, "Well, why don't you start a podcast of your own?" Instead of, "Well, why don't you start a podcast of your own?" Right?
Oh
And
wow.
for a
Okay.
second, I was like, "Yo,
I didn't know
is
that.
Miguel challenging me?" I was like, "Miguel, is 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 Miguel coming at me sideways?" Not in a bad way, like in a, professional, whatever kinda way. And then we
Yeah, more
talked
more
and
like, "Hey, leave me alone." Like, I don't want your constructive criticism. Why
yeah,
don't you just start a podcast of your own?
yeah,
No,
you know what I mean?
that's not what I meant.
I know, because we talked about it afterwards, but it's just funny because in that moment, in that split second, you know what I mean? I had to stop for a second and go back and reread it, and then I think I remember correctly, I asked you, and you were like, "No, man, you got, good ideas, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera," and I was like, "Oh," you know, and that's all stuff that can get lost in a text, but, speaking of the
Yeah.
start of a podcast and content creation, before we get in the watch stuff, we gotta do a wrist check, and as the guest of honor, what is on your wrist today, Miguel?
So I've been wanting this watch, man, and I think I told you the story since way before I started watch collecting. I mean, I've heard about this brand, and it's a Hispanic. You hear of Rolex, and it's like Rolex, right? You own a Rolex, you're rich, and it's like
Yeah,
that's what you think growing up. And then as I got into the hobby, I always liked the Submariner, like that silhouette, that it wasn't even about Rolex anymore. It was more about the silhouette because I would see an Invicta Pro driver and be like, that is did I say driver? Pro diver, diver. So I would see that watch and be like, I love that silhouette. That is so beautiful. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, wait a minute, that's an homage of the watch that I've been lusting over for years. But I just never pulled the trigger because I thought spending more than $500 on a watch was stupid and ridiculous. And why would you do it? Right. But once you get into the hobby, you do. But anyway, the years went by. I spoke to my wife and she's like, you're not going to get that. That's too much money. So I challenged myself and I said, and this is the reason why I started the channel, believe it or not. And I don't know if I publicly kind of said this specific thing, but one of the reasons I started the channel was number one, because I love talking about watches and it was just
yeah,
too much talk. My wife got tired of it. She's like, man, do you don't have friends or somebody you could talk to about these kind of things? Like, I'm not into it, like at all. Like, I don't care. And it's getting kind of annoying. And number two, I noticed that a lot of these guys were like, "Oh, this company sent me a watch and I get to keep it." I was like, "Wait, what? How do you get to keep an expensive watch like a micro brand? Like, how does that happen? What?" And then I thought, I was like, well, what if I get free watches or grow my channel and like big, like blow it up, right? Because you don't know, you're kind of naive. You have big expectations, but you're like, what if I blow up my channel, get a bunch of free stuff, sell it off and save, save, save. That way I could use that money to buy something expensive. Because my wife prohibited me from doing that. She's like, I know you work hard and we make our money and everything, but our money should not be going towards things like that. Because if you want to buy a Rolex, she was of that mentality before. She was like, who do you think you are? We're not rich. Look around you. We're not driving a Mercedes Benz. Like, why do you think that you're going to own an expensive watch? You're trying to pretend to be somebody else. And I was like, no, I promise you I'm not. That's not what it's about. And it took years for her to finally realize that Rolex wasn't about just the prestige and the perception
yeah,
that I have money. It was more about an enthusiast thing and how well built they are and the heritage and the aesthetic. Long story short, I did what I was set out to do, partnered up with a bunch of brands, and I remember in one of my streams, I sold like 20, 30
Yes.
watches. It was insane. And I bought another watch. I bought another Rolex. But then since I bought that, it inspired me to sell even more stuff and get more things free. But anyways, I ended up with one of my grails, a Rolex Submariner 16610. This is a pre-ceramic. I have it
Mm,
on this rubber strap. I just been rocking it on this rubber strap from
yeah.
Horus. And then it's an amazing watch, man. I love it. I love the aesthetic of it. I recently picked up another watch that I really like, and I haven't even worn it because I can't take my Submariner off the wrist. And I'll tell you the story about
So,
that, but
yeah, we could
but that's what I'm
definitely
wearing.
that's awesome. Yeah, and it's, and so, I know I have some newer watch enthusiasts listening and some or watching as well, and also newer content people. And I think it's important to hear like these stories of the buildup, right? And the stories
Yeah,
of the obstacles because, even if you had the money, sometimes it's there's cultural stuff in the background.
yeah,
There's,
hmm,
all these different things. And it's important to experience a bunch of different stuff before then, and that probably
yeah,
solidified your
yeah,
choice for what your true grail is. And then when you get it
100%.
on, I mean, it's a physical manifestation, a physical representation of
I
your
agree,
work, of all your work in that because, like,
100%.
those videos don't make themselves. They you know, they don't make themselves, and
Yeah.
it's a testament to your time and your dedication and stuff, so I just wanna say congrats. I think it's awesome piece, man, and it looks great on your wrist. It sits
Oh,
on top of
thanks.
it
No,
real nice.
I absolutely love it, man, and to be honest with you, the watch, the first scratch my itch that I got into it, and it was thanks to my friend, TGV. If you haven't checked him out, the Urban Gentry, I highly recommend him. He's an OG.
Yeah.
He used to talk so highly of the Seiko SKX 007, and at that time, when I got into watch collecting, which is about 10 years ago, you could pick them up for sub $200, brand new, box papers. So, again, that was a lot of money for me, but I finally convinced my wife. I was like, Can I pick up this watch?" And she's like, "Well, you're gonna buy from the internet? That's scary. What if it's not real?" I was like, "Well, there's this guy on the internet that everybody talks about, and I think he's legit. His name is Mark, I think, Long Island Watch. I don't know, whatever,
Yeah.
but I'll buy it from him." So that's where I bought my SKX 007, and I remember I got it, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, "Wait." So I just spent 200 bucks, which in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a lot of money, but this is a lot of watch for the money. It's ISO
Yeah.
certified, it has a bezel, it's automatic, and it's all made in house, which I hear, I don't know, I think is a good thing. I don't really know much about that, but it's pretty cool. I rock that thing for a while, and I actually got rid of it. I kind of regret it, but at the same time, I knew I was getting get rid of it to make money for my the first Rolex, and I don't
Yeah.
regret it. I do and I don't. I go back and forth, but I'm like, you know what? The past few years, I never really wore it. It was just in the watch box as a memento. But I said to myself, well, I was gonna give it to my son, but now I could give him a Rolex. So I think I'm giving him a better gift. So
Yeah.
that's the excuse I keep telling myself. But anyway, what is on your wrist, man?
Oh, man. I'm, my Grand Seiko
Oh, yeah.
SBGX 335.
Love the Sriracha. Yep.
Oh, man, this thing, and I haven't even cleaned it. Well, I cleaned it the other day, but not recently. And,
But
I've been wearing.
Sriracha smudges so easily. I mean, you just, like,
Oh,
literally just touch it a little bit and you're done.
yeah. It's, and this is, it's probably the grail I never knew I wanted. And, you speaking of your SKX, it's, that's what eventually sold me on it is that Seiko's
What?
afforded me yeah, Seiko's afforded me this opportunity to experience what they can do at varying price points, and I've put that out before. And so when it came time to do my first splurge on something I knew I wanted a diver, right? I knew I needed something
Yeah.
around 42, like I wanted something about 42 millimeter case
Mhm.
diameter. I have a larger wrist, so the 49 lug to lug's not a big deal for me. I mean, you can see it there on wrist.
Looks perfect on you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And then
How big is
like
your wrist?
seven and a
7 1/2?
half, 7.5
Yeah.
inches, or
Yeah.
19.05 centimeters for all of our
Oh,
European
for other
listeners.
European people,
You
then
know,
don't get offended.
we don't want to leave you out. And but yeah, and I knew what I was getting. Like I bought mine
Yeah.
online. I would have never done that before. Shout out Crown and Caliber. Thanks for giving me a great deal and
Oh, yeah.
awesome
Crown
packaging.
Color.
And yeah, I mean, it was awesome. And I pulled the trigger because I had seen some Grand Seikos before. I got to handle some at Wind Up when I went up there to New York. But I was like, all right, I trust Seiko, right? And there's alignment issues, and we can go on and on about that stuff. But for the most part,
Yep.
I knew I was going to get something that was reliable, and this thing has led to a fire sale of all kinds of stuff, and I'm using that pretty soon to purchase something else.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
following
Can't wait to
I'm
hear.
following the Miguel game plan, you know what I mean? But this isn't about me, this is about you. And s and speaking and speaking of, the content creation and stuff, again, I think it's an excellent channel. I think that your content is,
Thank you.
it has a soul to it. There is a professionalism and a touch of class to almost everything that you do, and I appreciate that because when we interact with our timepieces, um, I feel like we get this one-on-one relationship. So when you watch someone's videos or content, it's always nice when you feel that. And I've always felt like watching your video, I'm just hanging out with a buddy of mine. We're just shooting the stuff about watches, even though he's not there. You know what I mean? It's like I get
Yeah.
to hang out with Miguel for like 12 minutes and drink a cup of coffee in the morning while he's talking about his his uh his snowflake or whatever. You know what I mean? I think it's pretty cool. But what's one thing about hosting a podcast that you didn't expect? Like initially or maybe down the road, something that's popped up to where you were like, "Oh, I didn't quite expect that."
So initially, if you listen to the first two episodes of my podcast way back then, I started the podcast by myself. I didn't have a co-host. I wasn't even thinking of bringing guests. In the reason I started the podcast was because I felt like the video form was too short and I had a lot to say and I had to condense it down into 7 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. I know there's some channels out there that do longer content, but for me that was already a lot, right? It was a lot behind the scenes to create the video. So I don't know if I could have done longer. And I like going off the cuff a lot of times, and everything in the video form was very much scripted. Nowadays, I go back and forth. I do a little bit of script. I do a little bit off the cuff. If I am very lazy or on a pinch where the company's like, "Hey, when is a video coming out? We sent you this." I'm like, "Oh man, as long as my B-roll is good and I got all the specs in front of me, I just kind of rattle it off. Maybe it doesn't sound as professional as when I like write it, but whatever, it is what it is. And as long as I hit the points that I want to hit, it is what it is." But something I didn't expect with the podcast was the the friendships that I developed from it. It was crazy. And I'm still kind of pinching myself because you do build friends from YouTube, but it's not the same. It's kind of like a level of respect of like, hey, you're a content creator, I'm a content creator. Like we respect each other and we kind of are friends, quote unquote. But it is not until they come on the podcast and we interact behind the scenes and doing the podcast that we just become friends. And I've become acquaintances with a lot of people, like, and I'll name drop, and I hope I don't
Huh,
sound weird doing this because I'm not
by all
trying to sound
means.
weird but TGV, like the urban gentry, man, like Cristiano has become I don't want to say a great friend, but he's a friend. Like we wish each other happy birthday or Merry Christmas, or we'll talk about like little things here and there, like DM each other, about
Yeah,
stuff like that. I've interacted with Adrian from Bark and Jack. We're not friends, but he knows me. We interacted because he's been on the podcast.
yeah,
Jody, just one more watch, great guy. We've interacted. Again, we're not friends, but we've interacted outside of YouTube and just kind of on a personal kind of space. And the list goes on. I mean, we've become really good friends with Simon, Escapement 24, of course, P. Ross, Timeless Sneakers
yeah.
and Watches, Omar, David Schwartz. I mean, Alias Eve from Alias. She keeps changing her name of her channel, but she's a girl that's in this space. Become friends with her, and you, of course, and a plethora of other people. But that's the one thing that I didn't expect, to become friends with people and then become friends with people that I used to look up to way before I
Yeah,
did YouTube. And I'm like, I'm pinching myself. I'm like, this is crazy because in our little watch world, these people are superstars. And to think that collaborating with them. Another one, my man from Watchfinder, Andrew, like
oh
we've
yeah,
actually become friends, like
yeah,
friends, like even more than the other people, which is kind of crazy because the guy's from England and we have nothing in common, but he's a funny guy and we get
yeah,
along, and I actually just went on their podcast because of that. It wasn't because my channel is humongous. It's just because he knows me as Miguel and he's gotten to know me as a real person. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to come on our podcast? I think it'll be fun." And it was fun. It was like
yeah.
one of the funnest things. And so that's, I talk a lot to
No, no, no.
answer your question. the people, the relationships I built with people, and the fans, quote unquote.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of listeners, but it is very nice to get props or get a DM or people post your thing like, "Hey, check out this episode." It feels good. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
cool. People actually get behind my work. That is awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's that's been a big surprise for me too, is just the dude, I can't even I could have never imagined the relationships I would have built. Have built before I started doing any of this stuff, right? And
Yeah.
like, because I remember when, we started. I don't even remember how we started chatting. It was just about watches, I guess, or whatever. But then you invited
Well,
me
you
on.
reached out to me, I think, because
Yeah.
you listened to podcasts or something, and and you could attest to this. I answer to anybody as long
Oh
as
yeah.
you're not a douchebag or something, and you ask me a question or whatever. I'll start a conversation with anybody
Yeah.
and answer any questions that I can. And I think that's what happened with us. I don't know
Yeah.
how it all kind of started, but it just kind of built upon because then I got to know you personally, and then you came on the podcast and we became friends. So
Yeah. I think it's important to give back, and I feel like that's a big thing that you do.
yeah.
You do it without making a grandiose scene about it either. Some people do, and they make a big show about giving back, and some people just give back, without. It's like the sports person that goes to the hospital in the middle of the night and visits kids, but doesn't have a camera there when they do it. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of important, and I think it's a good thing. So, one of my favorite questions to ask people that have our own content creation channel is what is a common myth you heard from people before you started this this journey in your channel that you'd like to share? That's either been proven, well, obviously if it's a myth, it's not true, but it's been proven to be untrue.
So the fact that a company gives you a free product, right? And you have to speak good about it.
Mhm.
And I basically that everybody's a sellout, right? So if a video says sponsored, that means that you sold out already. Like, oh, that person, we can't believe that person anymore. They gone too far because I'll give you an example. Like Adrian Barkinjack, every video he wants to make it very clear that he's independent and that he's not being paid and this and that. Yes and no. There's a lot of things that go behind the scenes. And I don't want to throw Adrian under the bus, but this happens to every content creator. It gets a point in your career, your journey, whatever you want to call it, that you do get approached by companies and they go, "Hey, we're going to send you a product, but we want you to talk really good about it. We don't want any negativity. So if you need a little bit of money or whatever, this is what we're expecting." So if you have integrity, you say no. And you say, "I appreciate it. I will review your product and I do want to get it for free, but I have to speak my mind and I cannot be bought." Right. Because if the product is garbage, people are going to come back to me and my reputation's on the line. So
Yeah,
$1,000, $500, what $200, whatever the amount is or more, cannot be bought. My integrity cannot be bought. So that's something that I guess it was a myth, but it's not a myth because I've heard of people
yeah,
kind of selling themselves for money, and that's not cool.
yeah,
But going back to the whole thing with Adrian, I want to present the difference, right? So what he says when says I'm an independent reviewer, yes, he is in a sense where he's not getting paid to say good things about the product, but don't be fooled that he doesn't get money from the companies. And he's made it very clear. He has a fee for his production fee is what he calls it. So for setting up his camera, setting up the video and editing and everything, he is getting paid by companies to do that. But he treats that as a business, kind of like a marketing business. But what he says in his review cannot be bought. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm not going to say positive or negative things about your watch based on what you tell me or you pay me. It is my views and my views only, and that's why I'm independent. But he does get money from companies, not every single one of them, and I don't know this for a fact. I just know based on the things that I've
yeah,
heard him say is he'll go on ski trips, he'll go to here, he'll go there. The companies pay for that stuff, right? They
yeah,
pay for his stay, they pay for his travel, whatever. So that is some form of compensation. He's not going to pay out of his own pocket to go over there just to go cover a watch and make a video. It doesn't make any sense. So another form that he makes his money obviously is with his merch, right? With the straps and everything.
yeah,
So Adrian's a perfect example for all of us to follow, that we do have to separate the whole production. You could pay me for my production and all this, but this does not in any kind of way, shape, or form going to have an effect on the
yeah.
actual review of the product. right? So that's something that it's kind of a myth, but it is kind of true. The whole pain thing. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. Like, who
Yeah.
do you trust? You know, and then you have people like Teddy Baldessar or Hodinky where they sell the product. So it's like, well, how can I trust you when you're talking about a product that you're selling in your shop? You're not going to talk bad about it because you want me to
Yeah.
buy the product. So how can I really trust you? So what these people do is more tell you the specs of the product, you know, and they
Mhm.
have to be very careful because once they start throwing their opinion on there, it's like, well, I don't trust your opinion. It might be
Yeah.
biased because you're selling the product. So they have a very difficult thing to navigate towards, and I want to keep it independent as well. Obviously, I've gotten paid via the watch or the
Yeah.
product, but the company knows that my views are not going to be swayed either in a positive way or in a negative way. But typically, what I do, and I hate when people do this, they'll go on my video and they go, "That's it." That's all the negative things you had to say about it? And they kind of start questioning my integrity. And it's like, look, before I say yes to any product, I don't care what it is, I do my due diligence. I go on the website, I go on YouTube, and if there's something that rubs me the wrong way, or I could tell that I'm not going to like it, I say no. Because then I know I'm going to be negative towards it. And that's not what my channel is about. My channel is about positivity, about humility, about making the community better, not bashing a product. Maybe I could get more views that way and be like, this is absolute garbage. Do
Yeah.
not buy. And then
Yeah.
taking a hammer in front of the camera. I'll probably make for some great content, but that's not me. So
Yeah.
anyway,
No, no,
long
that's
answer to your
great
question.
answer. Great answer, and I think it's important to, to add in, the company it's like for someone like Adrian, the company knows that they're gonna get a production value that they would probably have to pay someone a lot, their
Yeah.
internal
Yeah.
cost. You know what I mean? Like, when I say your videos or like, Mr. Ace K or, anyone that has really high
Oh,
video
Dale. Shout
production.
out to
Dale,
Dale.
shout out Dale. Go check out his channel, everybody, Mr. AK Productions. Dale's videography is great.
Amazing.
Yours is
He's
great.
my
Yeah.
mentor, by the way. I learned a lot from that guy. So
Oh, that's some foreshadowing, buddy. But and I think the company understands that, like, hey, if we pay the production fee to Adrian, it's fire and forget. You hit send and you don't got to do anything. You're gonna get this awesome video. And if he says, yeah, I don't like the way the crown's built, or the crown's manufactured, or it wore kind of wonky, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna get put out to however many viewers he has and watched however many times. And
right.
they can't actually quantify that. But um, yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I got a question. So when people are like, "Oh, that's really that's the only thing you found negative about the timepiece." How how much has your experience with handling different timepieces allowed you to be more, I would say, refined critically when it comes to reviewing timepieces? Is getting the pieces in your hand ahead of time, um, as beneficial as most people would lead us to believe it is?
So, man, that's a great question and a tough question to answer because before I got into this whole YouTube production or whatever and got as many watches as I gotten in or had the opportunity to interact with, I probably would have said the same thing. Just as long as you read the specs and the price kind of makes sense with the specs, it's a great watch. That is incorrect. Every watch is built different. It just because it has the same specs as something else doesn't mean that it's a great watch or it's going to wear great. A recent experience I had was with the Baltic MR01. I love the look of that watch. It is stunning. I'm like, that is like the Brigade numerals. It reminds me of a Patek, and for like 500-600 bucks. I bought it. I waited almost a year for that damn watch because it was back ordered, the hype around it. I got it. I opened the box and I looked at it. I was like, wow, that looks very pretty. As soon as I picked it up, I was like, oh, there's something wrong here. What? It just felt cheap, and I started looking at
Yeah,
it, I put it on my wrist, I was like, "What? No, okay, no, I don't know what's going on." So the more time I spent with it and I shot some B-rolls, like, it's something so weird where it looks amazing, but it doesn't feel amazing, it feels cheap, right? The bracelet felt cheap, the case felt cheap, the everything, the movement, I'm like, "Is this even gonna be enough for her for, like, around, I mean, for like a year or 2? Is it gonna break down on me? So I made a review, and that's probably one of my most kinda negative reviews that I've done,
Yeah.
and I still try to make it, like, nice, but the crazy thing is that there's people coming out. Actually, there's a buddy of mine that and I don't remember his handle, I'm sorry, but he just came out today and, said the same thing. He waited, he bought it, and he's like, "I am so underwhelmed. I haven't even sized the bracelet, and I'm gonna sell it." He hasn't even taken it out of the
Yeah.
watch box. And basically, Steven Nichols, here we go, talking about time. So on Instagram, at talking about time, this is his handle. So he same thing. He's like, you know what? I got the watch, and it's just not for me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just not for me. And uh so yeah, it to answer your question, it is important to handle a lot of watches so you kind of know, number one, what do you like? Do you like chronographs? Do you like dive watches? Do you like dress watches? And also, there is something to be said about the interaction between different price points, right? So I've handled everything, something as cheap as a $50 watch. I've handled homage watches, Pagani design. I've handled Rolexes, and I have yet to handle like a Patek or Audemars Piguet.
Mm.
I do want to, and Alonga and stuff like that, just because I want to see, what those pieces are like,
Yeah.
and if there's a thing, such thing as like diminishing returns, where it's like, well, does it mean that the higher that I pay, the better the value, or is it all in our heads? The law of diminishing returns is it's a real thing, but I wanna experience those watches to see if it's true, especially the AP, because I hear a lot of hype and around AP,
Yeah.
so I wanna check that out.
Yeah, it's and I'm interested too because I I got to handle, Ricardo Syme's, Grand Seiko, and when I was up in Windup, he let me hold it. He took a really cool picture of the Zen I used to own, and, but that was the
Wait,
first time I
is that the guy from
yeah.
Watchbox?
No, no, Ricardo was from Time and Tide, now he's part of Worn and Wound.
Oh, that's right, Ricardo.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep, yep. I saw him outside the venue, and, I was like fanboy. I'm like, "Oh, Ricardo, my name's Jason," and he knew who I was, and I was like and, I had my Zen, he's like, "Oh, can I get a picture of that?" So I'm holding, like, the reflector, and he took a picture of it in my pocket, right? Because I can never get a good pocket shot. He got a great pocket shot of it, and then he let me hold his Grand Seiko, and that was, like, the first step. I was like, "Man," there's a and so I
Mm.
think, like, holding an AP or a Vacheron or something like that, being able to hold one and see it, you can just draw a lot of information from the tactility of the whole thing. But
Yeah, no, I agree. And Grand Seiko, just as a quick segue, they look amazing in video and all that, but it's not until you actually hold one or see one in person that you're like,
crazy,
"Oh, wait a minute." Yeah, the Sriracha polish, man,
crazy.
uh, yeah, 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 and the
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 fact that there's a
dials.
the fact that there's a person building the outside and another person building the inside, hand making them is, we could have a whole we should just do a whole video on Grand Seiko.
On Grand Seiko,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, an interesting thing that I've learned from my podcast and all that stuff, there's just tons of challenges, right? So for you, having, 300 plus videos into it, having 20,000 subscribers into it, having, been there, done that in a lot of areas, what would you say was your biggest challenge in producing your content? And what was the most important lesson you took away from that?
Yeah, so at first the challenge was the lighting and the videography part of it, because I'm self-taught all the way. I took tips here and there and whatnot, but at first that was the biggest challenge. So actually figuring out like the lighting and the cool B-roll, because obviously I aspired to be like Watchfinder, right? When I was younger, in my infancy of the channel. And then also one thing that I still kind of struggle with, believe it or not, and you know this, I hate writing scripts. I am
Yeah.
not good at doing that. I don't like it. I hate it. It's the most challenging thing. I love the B-roll aspect of things and the creative part of like, how are we going to make this pretty and make it look cool, because I'm an artist, right? So
Yeah.
that's artistic for me. But when it comes to both editing and doing the actual writing of something, I don't enjoy it. So that still continues to be my most challenging part of creating a video, because it's easy to say, these are the specs. That's
Yeah.
easy. Could just read a spec sheet. But it's like, well, how do I feel about the watch? And also, I think you need to be kind of intelligent too. And I like when people do this, is like, they'll take a watch and say, but this reminds me of this other one. They draw parallels within the watch industry
Yeah.
because that just shows how mature you are into horology, because you know references or you remember names of models that kind of, you know, look like this, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, then it kind of makes you not as knowledgeable, I guess. So that's still something I'm kind of struggling with as well, because I want to get more into maybe the history of horology and look at different old school models to
Yeah.
know when a new model comes in to say, hey, that reminds me of this, and they took homage from that, because
Yeah.
then maybe you look at that old model and it's a better buy than the new thing, even though it's
Yeah.
a completely different brand. I don't know, but that's my biggest challenge, man. To be honest, dude, just the writing and the editing's okay. I don't like it, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's more
No,
the writing.
I understand what you mean because for me, that's probably the most fun thing is the writing,
Yeah.
the research and the writing. And I've been going back and forth with that too. Like, how much video do I want to create? I don't know if I want to, I don't know. I don't being honest with you. I don't know if I want to go to the lengths to try to match guys like you, Dale, Watchfinder and Co. I mean, Adrian, you got people that are banging out beautiful videos, man. Well flowing storytelling videos, and it's like, you know what? I can just freaking write, because I know I can write, but it's just one of those things for me. That's been my biggest thing too. But yeah, script writing, bro. It's not for everybody. But I'll tell you, if it's not for you, that's okay because your freaking videography and photography is pretty
No,
freaking excellent.
I appreciate it, man. But let me tell you something, and let me tell everybody listening and watching. It's like, don't try to emulate anybody else. And I agree with you that Dale and Adrian and all these guys, Watchfinder, they have amazing videography and storytelling, of course. I mean, the amazing storytelling. Watchfinder Andrew. I mean, he literally writes books. So,
Yeah,
in case you don't know, he's an author. So he has a very easy time kind of speaking and writing, but he doesn't do the videography. Some other person
yeah,
does the videography, right? Tom. And I met Tom too. He's a cool guy. But I would say, man, if you feel like you want to shoot pictures or shoot video, go for it. Who cares if it's not to the level of other people? As long as you want to do it, because once you start doing it, you become better somehow. Like you just kind of start challenging yourself. And I'll give you an example, my boy P. Ross. Like P. Ross keeps making his videos, however the hell he wants to make his videos. He looks up to people like me and other people that are like, wow, you guys create some good things, but I'm not trying to be you guys. I want to be P. Ross. I want to continue being myself. And he just
yeah,
goes off the cuff, and he's created a niche for himself where people follow him because that's just him. He's raw.
yeah,
He's just that's who he is. That's
yeah,
and you're a military guy. Like I like watching your stuff or listening to your stuff because you're very kind of like military. Everything's by the book and everything's like concise and very I don't know how to explain it, but every time I read your stuff, even your agenda for this podcast, I was like, whoa, okay. Like I'm like, I feel like I'm going into a meeting. Like everything is
yeah,
just so like military based, so structured, I guess I should
yeah,
say. So I'm saying this to you and to everybody else.
yeah,
Don't stop yourself from doing something because you're trying to emulate yourself to somebody else, or be like, I'm never going to be as good as XYZ. Yeah, maybe not, but maybe you'll excel in this other part
yeah,
that they're not good at. You know what I mean? So if we just compare ourselves to everybody else, we will never do anything with our lives. So I would
yeah,
say challenge yourself, do something that you love, and just don't compare yourself to anybody else. And if you need help with anything, reach out to people like me or like Jason or like anybody
yeah,
else and ask for pointers.
yeah. Help's always available. And I think I've realized
Always. Yeah.
most people, if you're just genuine and I think sometimes people you can tell when someone's doing it for, you know,
For clout.
yeah, for cloud or something. But speaking of help, um, and you spoke about this a little bit earlier, you know, have you had an important mentor in this whole thing? And if so, or more than one, who is it or who are they? And then what do you think you can take away from having a mentor, I guess mentoree relationship?
Yeah, so I mean, I man, that's a tough one because I would say as far as like photography and videography, there's two guys that kind of helped me out, but this is a little bit later in my journey, and this is kind of when I started getting a little better in understanding like lighting and reflection with lighting and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And for sure, Dale. Dale, Mr. Ace K Productions. He is a commercial pilot. He's in Australia, and we became friends on Instagram. How? I think it was because he was wearing Seiko SPB 143, and somehow I was in the middle of trying to buy one, and I think I reached out to him, and we somehow kind of became friends, and now we're good friends. And he's giving me a lot of tips, a lot of pointers on, like, the camera settings and the lighting. And then another guy is Brandon. He now works for Hodinky, but I met him before he was working for Hodinky. His name is Brandon Menancio, and he's given me tips also about the videography part of things. And I take notes, mental notes of how he kind of does his video productions, where it's more fun, it's more like a week on the wrist. If you go to Houdinki
Yeah.
and check out his week on the wrist, it's so effortlessly. And I always tell him, like, how do you do it, man? It's like, I don't know, man. I just, yeah, that's how he talks. Like, that's
Yeah.
how he is. And I'm like, I respect you, Brandon. I respect you. And of course, indirectly, Adrian and TGV and Jody, just one more watch. Dave, just a watch. I mean, that guy's a
Yeah.
huge influence. And Dave is actually the reason I met P. Ross to begin with. He had about 1,000 something subscribers on his channel. I had about Dave did, and I had about 80 or 50, and P. Ross had about 30 subscribers. And he made a video of like underrated watch channels. And P. Ross was on that list, and I was on that list. And it came out of nowhere. Thanks to that day, I remember I got like over 100 subscribers, and it was huge.
Oh
It was
wow.
massive. And I met P. Ross, and then it just kind of became friends from there. And I remember being there when Dave hit 100,000 subscribers. He did a live stream, and I was on that live stream, and it was amazing. It was a good feeling. I was super proud of him. And he is a Christian man, and he is in Japan. And that's also another thing that kind of spoke to me, because I am Christian, and obviously we relate in a completely different way aside
Yeah.
from watches. We never really talk about God. I think he likes to keep things separate. We talk about watches, but I know where his faith is at. So yeah, those would be some of my mentors. If I'm leaving anybody out and I've spoken to you, I do apologize.
Yeah.
It's you know.
Oh, no, I understand because you have what I would call a large crew. Like there's these crews in the watch enthusiast space. I'm kind of developing my own crew, and then you have, obviously I would consider you part of that, but you guys have your locked in guys like the Tudor Bros and stuff like that. And, you know, gave me some inspiration to start the Grand Seiko operations group, which is there's a couple of us fledgling members of that. And an invite will be to you on the way. But
Oh, nice, thanks. All
oh
right.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, "Where's the invite? I didn't get an invite."
Yeah, it's a formal process. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's
Okay.
coming your way. But yeah, and so and we talked about before, like it's really obvious to see like all the success and stuff. We've talked about mentors and we've talked about challenges you weren't expecting in the beginning. And me, I'm very like material based, not like in a materialistic way, but I've always felt like real leaders give their people the tools they need to succeed, right? Like you can't expect someone to do a job and do it well and just put them in an empty room with nothing, right? Like that's just this isn't the Stone Ages anymore. So, what are some underrated tools that you feel are like indispensable if you're going to do content creation? And you can focus on either the podcast part of it or the videography part or the photography part. Pick whatever area you want to, but some stuff that you've learned through trial and error that you think if you're new, you should pick up.
So, easy, easy. One of the most basic things that everybody has, a phone. If you have a cell phone, you pretty much have a multi-tool right there, right? Um, you have a camera to take pictures. You have a camera to take video, and depending on your model, some things emulate a real kind of
Yeah.
camera, DSLR camera, very well. Um, I would say a microphone. They sell microphones for cell phones that are very inexpensive. In fact, I just
Yeah.
bought one myself from Amazon for like $20, and that's what I've been using in my latest videos. So I'll give you a little behind the scenes. So I have my
Yeah.
Sony camera A6300. Now it's old. It's a dinosaur now in technical terms, but that's kind of what I use for all my B-roll stuff. And before I used to shoot myself for like the talking head
Mhm.
portion of it. But unfortunately, these cameras are notorious for not having like a good solid microphone port. And
Yeah.
the microphones that they do sell for them are very expensive, and I'm cheap. I'm frugal when it comes to those things. So what I did is I have this phone, and It's the younger generation than the newest one that's out. I don't even know what the hell it is, but it has a 4K camera in it. So I bought this little microphone, this a Bluetooth microphone that you could stick in the port and you put on. So my latest videos, the video for
Mhm.
that joke video that
The
I made,
spaghetti scametti.
Spaghetti Scametti, and even the video before that, if you see those are shot on my phone. All I did is my
Oh,
phone,
wow.
the audio was actually coming out of the phone too with my microphone.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was all shot on my phone, just with good lighting. So I would say you have your cell phone, so that could serve as your camera. It could serve as for video, for just regular photos. Also, it has the capability of you recording actual audio in it. If you're going to do like a behind the scenes and kind of like a narrative, you
Mhm.
could use your recording there. That's what I've done millions of times. As long as you have a good microphone, again, good, go on Amazon, click
Yeah.
for the highest rated and get a microphone. Lighting is crucial, and that's where I would probably invest most of my money at first. If you already have a cell phone, some good lighting. You need at least like 2 good lights with diffusers, because diffusers are gonna make things look a little bit smoother. So I would say that, man, and a tripod. If you don't have a tripod,
Yeah.
get one. They're inexpensive. So a tripod, a good camera, whether it's a cell phone or a camera and lenses, lights, and a microphone. That's all you need. And creativity, a lot of creativity and a lot of drive. So,
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah, I think, and I know I appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the audience will too. Because a lot of times it's like you see, you see the finished product, but not a lot of people talk about what goes into actually setting up to even start to go down that road. And the tools, a lot of times, are a big part of it. And it's also
yeah.
cool to speak in generalities. Like it's not this specific phone. You just need a cell phone with a pretty decent camera on it, and the ability to
Right.
have a
And
microphone.
furthermore, there's a lot of apps that do video editing. They're either free or you pay a little bit of money and you could do it on your phone. For the first 2 years of my channel, everything was done on my phone. Everything. The B-roll, the headshots, the narration, the editing, everything was done
Oh wow.
from my cell phone. Obviously, you could tell the change now, because for my B-roll, I use an actual camera with nice
Yeah.
lenses, and I'm using Final Cut on my Apple computer. So now I invested the
Okay.
money on a really good software, editing software in it. It changed things. I bought that was in 2023. So if you go back and look at my videos from 2023 and on, you could tell the difference in quality, because now it's like true 4K. Before, I think I was shooting 4K, but because the resolution of my editing software wasn't great and it was a free software, the video quality wasn't as sharp. But now I think it's gotten a little better. So, and I just want to strive for better and better. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. No. Excellent. Excellent advice. All right. One of my favorite questions to ask people during an interview, especially when it comes to this. Um, so as a podcast host, because you host people sometimes for interviews, right?
right.
What's your biggest guest pet peeve?
Honesty,
Yeah.
and I've
Yeah.
told P.
Always
Roz this.
honesty.
Sorry,
Always
P.
honesty.
I'll show you. That what I just did. Sipping water and then like dumping something so hard that you could
Yeah.
hear it is like and I'm sorry for doing it. I just had to show an
No, it's
example.
cool.
That is my biggest pet peeve when people do that. I don't
Mhm.
care about what they talk about. I don't care if they get stuck. I don't care if they deviate from the question. That's normal human nature. But when somebody is drinking and you could hear that they're drinking, and then they put the cup down or whatever down, and you could hear that, it takes away from me trying to focus on what I'm trying to focus on. So that's probably
Yeah.
the biggest pet peeve.
It's a distractor.
It is a distractor. What about
It's
you?
like it's like when you talk like you talk with your
And
hands.
I'm telling you, man, just
Yeah. I was an instructor for a long time and they taught us like you don't want to have distractors. Like you don't want to use your hands too much because then the students don't pick up on what you're actually trying to tell them. And my biggest pet peeve, hmm, that's a good question. I don't know if I've
you don't have
developed
one
one
yet.
yet. Yeah, I'll get there. I think. Yeah,
That
I
does
try to
bug you
be.
though, when
Yeah,
somebody drinks water or something.
yeah, I try to prepare if I'm going to be a guest on someone's podcast. I try to prepare by watching some of their stuff. Usually, I already have, but watching it again, kind of understanding their flow of conversation because everyone's a little bit different.
Mhm.
And then just kind of get some background on them. So I kind of it helps me understand what they're asking and why they're asking
Yeah.
it a little bit better, kind of thing. But that's mine. All right, so all this stuff you've obviously probably consumed as much stuff as you've put out, if not more. I tend to believe that most people, it's
Yeah.
like a funnel, right? Like you consume all
Yeah.
this and it comes to you pumping out something. Here's my hands. And
Right.
uh any specific piece of content, book, movie, video, documentary, podcast, anything that you've ran across that you would recommend to someone that's getting into this, that helped you either when you started or as you continue to go forward? And if there's not
Well,
one, it's
for
okay.
Yeah, yeah. For me, the biggest things was not so much in written form because I'm very lazy when it comes to reading. As you can tell, I don't like script writing for a reason because I don't like reading and I don't like writing, and I know it probably comes across dumb. I remember one of the things that inspired me, and it's dumb, and I'm pretty sure you have this book, is A Man and His Watch. Every single person and their mom that's into watches has that book. I recommend that book for a number of reasons. It's an easy read, but is more about the pictures. Do you know what I'm talking about? A
Yeah, I
Man and
have the
His
book.
Watch?
I have
Okay.
it.
So, FYI, funny story, every single one of those pictures was shot on an iPhone?
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't
So,
know that.
yeah, yeah. Every single one. I know. I'm like, what? How? What? I don't know
Yeah,
if he used like a filter, maybe like a little lens adder. I don't know, but every single
yeah,
one of those pictures was shot on an iPhone, which is crazy. But
yeah,
there was something about that book, and I don't know why you own it, but I own it because of the photography, so cool, and
yeah,
also seeing iconic watches beat up in that book is
yeah,
it's refreshing. It's like, wow, people actually wear these things and some of the stories behind it. Early on, Hodinkee was actually helpful because I used to go on their website and actually learn a little bit. I didn't read the whole thing, but I
yeah,
would specifically go and read a few things. But the biggest thing for me was YouTube. And back in the day, there wasn't a lot of YouTube channels watch related. So TGB was obviously the guy
yeah,
that kind of helped me, his older stuff, because I didn't know a lot of these things. The guys need to understand that back in the days, back even before YouTube, you would only consume your things in watch forums. That's before my days, and
yeah,
I'm glad that I wasn't there because
yeah,
then it probably would have been very difficult for me to grow
yeah,
because I don't like reading too much and interacting in that kind of way. But for as far as YouTube channels go, or resources, I would say YouTube. Honestly, it's like the biggest way to grow, and I would stick with maybe the bigger channels. Watchfinder does a really good job. Adrian does a pretty good job. TGV. I mean, there's a lot of channels to list. Teddy Baldassar is amazing too because he's very technical.
yeah,
Everything's from a technical perspective from that guy. And then if you want to learn like about vintage watches, I would say King of Vintage, what's his name? KOV
yeah,
on YouTube is amazing. He's from Amsterdam. Or also my friend Cam runs a YouTube channel called, and a shop here in LA, Craft and Tailored. Amazing. He'll take a vintage piece and talk about it and tell you the history of it if you're into that kind of things. So just resources like everywhere. I would say that. And even if you're into the homage kind of things, my affordable watch collection, and my boy Abib from Israel, he does an amazing job. And there's just so many other people that do great jobs with different things. And of course, Jody, just one more watch. He is amazing because he brings fun to the
yeah,
forefront, and he has a lot of information on a lot of different watches, a lot of different price points, and I appreciate that. He doesn't just focus on the high end; he focuses on the homage and the mid tier
yeah.
and everything and everywhere in between. So
He runs a wide gamut of different price points
yeah,
for watches. Yeah, and he's funny. Andrew from
yeah.
I've never met him. He is hilarious. You if he watches this, which I don't know if he will, but just tell Andrew
I'll
that
send them the
during
link. I'll
yeah
send them the link.
my if I'm watching videos in the background, he has actually made my wife chuckle
Oh yeah, his
from
his
his
jokes are
dry
funny.
sense of
He's a
humor.
funny guy.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah,
because because she's interested in watches and she has her own watch collection, and but she'll be like doing some like craft or something like that, and he'll make a one of his his dry humor jokes, and she'll chuckle, and I'm like, yeah, this guy's funny, man. He's really
he
really
is
funny,
funny.
and you don't
He's actually
expect it
pretty funny.
with the quality of the video. You don't expect this level of
I know.
hilarity, right? It's good,
I know.
like setting you up for the okey doke. But
Yeah.
so I always ask what someone's grail piece is now, but I'm gonna give you a slightly different question for that.
Mm. Okay.
Just
Thank you.
hear me out. I would normally ask what your grail piece is, but I feel like you've obtained that grail piece. But having the experience with these Rolexes that you have and the new GS you picked up has a newer, higher horology grail piece popped up for you, or the idea of possibly finding one day popped up for you?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. So for the longest time, the Rolex Mariner was always my grail, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people probably made fun of me because it's like, how can that be your grail? It's so vanilla. Everybody has it. It's so played out. And I'm like, I can't change my emotions towards this, and it's
Yeah,
the heart wants what the heart wants, right? Logically probably doesn't make sense, right? Because it's like, you're a watch guy, you should be looking at different pieces. Yeah, I get it, and I admire them, but this was it for me. And then when I got it, it just kind of fulfilled everything for me, and I was like, I don't even want to buy anything else. And to be honest with you, the only reason I bought the Grand Seiko and keep buying things is just because it's an addiction at this point. It's
yeah,
like that kind of gratification that you get of like, that dopamine, right? Like of buying something and looking for something, and it's like something I need to shake off, and I need to work on that myself because it gets very expensive. And the thing is, I know people always go like, well, where do you got all this money from, right? And you keep buying expensive things. It's just like I'm rotating the money. I sell pieces, get the money
yeah,
back, and then put it on something else, and that something else may sell for something else, and then I have money and more money, and then I still keep getting review pieces, and I sell those, and that's where the money's coming from. It's not
yeah,
that I'm rich or not that I'm using my money. Again, it's
yeah,
all from the hobby.
yeah. Nor is
As
it any
far
of
as
their business.
well, that too.
Yeah,
You're very. I'm polite, not unlike
yeah.
you. No, I'm just
Just
kidding.
I'm gonna call it like I see it. It's not their business.
Yeah. As far as a grail aside from this, I mean, I will love to get into the independent stuff. Obviously a Jorn or an MBNF or Felipe Piccolo. I don't know if you've seen that guy on Instagram, but amazing things, handcrafted and stuff like that. I think that's probably something that I would love to get into my next journey, but is very, very expensive,
Yeah,
and you need to have the money to play in that space. But as far as anything else, I mean, I admire a lot of things, right? Panerai and IWC and Omega and Grand Seiko and all this, but I
yeah,
don't see something in their catalog that I'm like, oh my god, that is my grail piece. I want
yeah,
it. It's more the independent stuff. Like every time I see an MB&F, I drool because I am huge on skeletonized watches. I know it's a love hate for a lot of people.
yeah,
For me, it's if done right, then I absolutely love it, right? I
yeah,
absolutely love those pieces. So I don't have a specific model in mind. I like the Evil line of the MB&F, but I mean, getting one is nearly impossible. And Jorn, I mean, he has so many cool pieces that again, another impossible piece to get, but just the something about his watches, like Jorn watches, like the way the hands are made, the shape of them, and the craftsmanship, and I don't know, they're just beautiful
yeah.
pieces, man. I even like work, like, I like weird crap work and stuff like that, you know? So,
I
yeah,
think
man.
everyone should have a weird, quote unquote, out of the box piece, because
It's
there's some
fun,
level
yeah.
of fun there, right? Because you're kind of like coloring outside the lines, you know?
Yeah, and I have a few pieces in my collection that are micro brands that are weird and people hate. So Zia Design, I have that world, the little globe world thing. What's it called? I forget what it's called. But Zia Design makes this cool watch that has like a world on it, and I made a
Yeah.
video about it. And then Ottawalk, they make a really cool watch with like wandering hours and just different ways of telling time. So I have Ethore Light is what it's called. I have
Mhm.
that one. Then the Alto Aid, I forget the model uh name that I have, but again, wandering hours where it's like skeletonized is a different way of telling time. I don't wear them that much, but just having them in the collection and opening the box puts a smile on my face. I'm like, "This is cool," and it's always one of those things where I show people, like, locally, right, like family members or whatever,
Mhm.
and they go, "What the hell is that?" Like, I've never seen anything like that, and that's a
Yeah.
cool thing, like, yeah, you
Yeah.
never seen it because it's not common, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's fun watching, it's been fun watching your collection change over time and you get stuff in. I think it's fun to do that with anybody, but it's been fun watching yours too.
But it's
So Miguel, I just
frustrating
want
at the same
oh, yeah.
time. I would bet because my buddy Omar, Timeless Sneakers and Watches, he does the same thing. He gets so many pieces in that you're like, "Oh, that's a cool piece. That's a cool piece." But you get so many new watches that it gets to the
Mhm.
point where like, "Well, is that really a keeper? You're just like reviewing it? Like, what are you doing?" You're like
Yeah.
flipping between watches so much. And but it is what it is. It's a journey, man. It's like some watches just don't stick, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I've had stuff that I thought would never let go, and I've let it go in the pursuit of other things, and, we'll see. it's a long winding road, and one that unfortunately never
Expensive.
really ends. Yeah, yeah, it can
Yeah.
get there. But yeah, I just want to say thanks, Miguel, for coming on and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with your whole story and everything you've done. I really appreciate it. I know my viewers will appreciate it. Where can everyone find you online? And plug something
Yeah.
new that you're doing if you want.
So SoCal Watch Reviews, you could find me there on YouTube, on Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok, again, I created it not to dance, not to make weird things. I just post the reels that I post everywhere else there. It's just, again, to funnel people into the YouTube channel because YouTube really is my main platform. It's kind of where I live. And Instagram is my second kind of favorite platform, where I interact with a lot of people behind the scenes and also get to showcase my photography or whatever, because that is pretty fun for me. And Instagram is just a tool for me. I don't really interact too much in there. If you speak Spanish, I haven't posted there in about, it's getting close to a year, and I'm kind of ashamed, but relojeando for anybody that speaks Spanish, or if you have somebody, a Spanish speaker in your family or friends that you want to get them into watches, I did put out a lot of videos on my Spanish channel. It was just getting to be too much work. So I just do the English. And then if you want to listen to my podcast, just go to any major podcast platform and yeah, search SoCal Watch Reviews. And if you do listen, we would appreciate a review, just like Jason would appreciate somebody leaving a review, because it does help, believe it or not. It helps, number one, our ego, which is funny, but
Yeah,
it's true because this is what motivates us. And number two, it helps the algorithm, right? So the more people interact with your show, the more maybe they bump it up and they actually shows up in people's feed. And unfortunately, that's kind of the name of the game. Is not that if you start this journey of doing social media and you don't get a lot of love, you don't blow up, it's not because you suck or your content is bad. It's because there's so much saturation now that it's hard for people to find you. So be patient and it will come, and then if you need help, then reach out to people, collaborate with people, because this is a great way to grow.
yeah,
Collaborate with people, and then those people will promote your channel or your podcast, and that's a good way to grow. So
yeah. No, excellent advice, and I'd fully support it. But
yeah.
thanks for everyone for tuning in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Miguel.
Sorry. Well, since you're gonna close the show, I want to thank you, Jason. Keep up the amazing work, man. I appreciate everything you do from a friendship perspective and also from a fellow content creator perspective. Your quality of everything that you put out is amazing, and I know you want to keep improving, and we all strive for that. But I could tell you that the level of your body of work is incredible, and you as a human being, I respect you. And yeah, just keep up the great work, and I really am humbled to be on your show, and I would love to come again if you ever have
Yeah,
time in the
open
future.
invite,
So
bro. Oh, and all the same, Miguel. I mean, you've done a lot for me and just taught me a lot. Sometimes you teach me without even realizing you're teaching me, but I appreciate
okay.
it because, well, no, because a lot of times how you conduct yourself on screen can teach people. It's like I want to be professional like that. I don't want to come out and just be like, "This watch sucks," to get clicks. You know what I mean? I
Right.
don't I don't wanna
Right.
wanna be like that. So I try to watch who I'd like to be like, and I like to surround myself with who I'd like to be like because you very much at times are some of your parts, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah, no, no, I agree.
but I appreciate everything too, and I appreciate the kind words. But to everyone at home, Miguel, you got any parting shots?
Hey, as I always say, stay humble. And I really truly mean that. It doesn't matter what pieces you have in your collection, what cars, whatever you amass in your life. Humility is something that will always stick with you and people could see through you. And being approachable is always very important. So humility is huge for me. So stay humble. Don't think because you have a Rolex or a Lamborghini that you're better than anybody else. You're better off, but that doesn't make you better than anybody else. So just stay humble.
Stay humble. And remember, at watchrolling.com, you make the watch. The watch doesn't make you.